Alright, it looks like we're good to go.
Okay, nice.
So, did you want to start, or should I?
So just give like an opening statement on white privilege or just racial privilege in general within the United States.
Just give like an overview of how you think about the topic.
Okay, fair enough. I basically believe that there is no real racial privilege within the United States, and that everyone, at least under a legal standard, I mean, obviously there's going to be some minor racism on each side, but I think a lot of how people are treated, it matches up with the crime stats, and I think the amount of pay people make, everything like that, it's just all relative to how they act. And yeah, I don't think there's any real white privilege or racial privilege in general within the United States.
Okay, I'm gonna give my my thoughts and overview on this. So typically, at least from what I've seen, the data that I've seen and compiled, you can tell me different if you have any sources. There seems to be privilege for whites in this country, like privilege that's different among different races, but like whites have more of it. And typically, we divide these privileges into three types of privilege, which is political, economic, and social. Now we can go through them one by one, but I'll let you pick political, social, or economic.
We can start with, let me see, I guess economic, as in you think whites are paid more for the same thing? Like, what do you mean?
Sure. So there's a wide variety of different types of privileges that white people have in our economic institutions. Hold on, let me scroll through my Google Doc to my sources, actually. Give me a second.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I looked a little bit through that. I looked through some of your sources. I'll say it is good that you at least have sources, because pretty much every time people bring up this topic, they don't really have any sources at all. They just say, oh, blank gets in trouble with the cops more. But yeah, I am willing to look through the sources that you have.
Sure. I personally believe that it's very important you have data to combat ignorance. Not saying that you're personally ignorant, I'm just saying in general, people might not know.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And of course, I should have researched this more in general, and after this debate, I'll research it some more. But for example, I'm glad that you linked the sources, but I did look through them a little bit, and I would say for it to be good evidence, it would have to be recent, and it would have to be very drastic to like say there's really a link. Just because. So for example, one of the ones I think we were just arguing in the comments, I don't think something from 2001 or 2002 in one state and just saying, oh, it took a few, I believe it was something along the lines of it took more callbacks for a black name. I don't think that's enough. I mean, unless that's been done over and over, and that's recent, like in 2020 and 2019. I don't think something from that far back that was only done in that one area, and they still called them back, it just took slightly more than a normal sounding name.
Well, actually, I have a source on that. According to a 2017 meta-analysis, they actually found that racial discrimination in terms of job hiring hasn't actually improved in like the last 25 years. And they found through both through these things called audit studies, where basically you would either send in a resume or you would go to the to like an interview in person, that blacks were that whites were 36% more likely to get callbacks than African Americans and 24% more likely to get callbacks than Latinos.
Okay, and what are all the factors for this? Like, what's the statistic?
Well, so I don't have like the methodology on hand, but what I imagine they did was they would compile like they would make up resumes that were pretty much similar or completely equal, and they would send them out using black or white names, and they would find out which one's more likely to get callbacks.
I mean, a name can be anything, though. Like, a lot of blacks have, and really anyone in the United States, black, white, Asian, whatever, just have more normal. By black name, what do you mean? Something like Shaniqua?
Yeah, like Shaniqua, Jamal, like Daquan, something like that.
Well, yeah, like I said, I'd have to look at it a little more.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, I mean, it's in the Google Doc. I'll post it when I finish editing the video for this debate. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. But do you have anything saying they get paid more by the hour or something like that?
Well, I don't have anything specific like that, but I do have a source here. This is from Georgetown.edu that while black people, white people, and Latinos have the same educational attainment, whites will get paid way more than blacks and Latinos will. And if you're going to ask why Asians weren't included, I went ahead and I actually looked up the methodology for that study. And what they did was the Census Bureau data that they were using to get the information and do the study, apparently it didn't use Asians. It didn't count Asians until 2003, and they were taking data from 1992, I believe, to 2016. So to take it from 2003 to 2016 would make absolutely no sense when looking at these markers for job career success.
Okay. Oh, my question is, so the races that do make more than whites in the U.S., do you think they're being discriminated against just as much as blacks or less, or maybe they're still being discriminated against, but for whatever reason they still end up making more? The only two that to my knowledge, again, I'll look for a study later, maybe post it in the comments to your video, but to my knowledge, Jews and Asians specifically still make more. But yeah.
Sure, so we can talk about that specifically. So the reason why these groups make more money usually is a lot of it has to do with, for example, for Asians in particular, I know this. Usually Asians are immigrants, and because they're immigrants, they already have to be rich before coming to the U.S.
So you're sure that Asians would automatically be rich just because they're immigrants?
Well, I'm not assuming that they're automatically rich. It's just that usually it takes much more money to get over here from Asia than it does from, let's say, Mexico. And usually they're either coming for more opportunities to like open a business, or they're coming for educational attainment like college.
Okay, but I mean, they would still have more money.
Yes, exactly. They have more money because they were richer beforehand. Like, this is a common, talking point. Like, it's called the model minority myth. And what people will do, I'm not saying that you're doing this in particular, but what people will do is they'll go, hey, look at X group like Asians or Indians or Jews. They've faced adversity and yet they've overcome. Why can't blacks do it? Usually it's done by conservatives who are kind of racist, but not really. They just think blacks are kind of lazy. And it's done by the far right to say that blacks are, like, genetically inferior as far as intelligence. I'm not saying that's you. I'm just saying that's what it sounds like you're doing.
Okay, well, do you think that's a possibility? Like, do you really think that's the main reason? Like, so overall between whites, Latinos, and blacks, you think that is the main reason whites make more, though? Because of privilege?
So when we're talking about like privilege, it's not necessarily like, ooh, white people have this like certain like when you're white you get like a $50,000 check like every 4 years. Like, no, that's not what it is. Usually it's a set of certain systems in the institutions that we have that benefit and favor whites over other groups that nudge them a bit. So a great example of this would be, let's say, for example, you had an employer who, let's say, didn't trust black people, for some weird reason. They just, I don't know, they just probably thought black people were more into crime, and so they hire white people a little bit more in that area, in the richer area where there's less likely to be crime because poverty isn't there. And so the blacks are in their area of poverty, crime, the already segregated neighborhoods from the past, and whites get to just keep on building more and more generational wealth in their communities. It's stuff like that that we completely ignore when talking about this, and that's why the white privilege conversation is so hard to have, I think.
Hello?
Yeah, hello? Did you disconnect or something?
No, no. I was just saying, okay.
So is there anything like you would want to bring up about this, or?
Well, I don't like saying this, but I mean, truthfully, and again, I'll have to post a statistic later, but I think crime rate wise, blacks currently do cause the most. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's not directly related to people hiring you, but I mean, I don't know.
Why do you think black people commit crime?
I don't know why it's higher than anyone else, but for the same reason anyone else would commit crime. I mean, like stealing for any other reason, if you're poor, for whatever reason.
How much crime do you think blacks commit, like, in proportion to whites?
Statistically, I've heard it's, for violent crime, I believe it's 43%. I've heard between 43 and 50% for violent crime, and that's usually men. But again, I'd have to double check that.
I think the last time I looked at it, I think it was like the 27 or 2018 number. I think it was like 37, and overall crime was like 27. So yeah.
Oh, you're saying 27% rather than 43 or 50?
No, 27% for all crime, 37 for violent crime.
Okay. Yeah, and again, I'll have to. And I think the population as a whole is 13%, but I think it's usually young black men within the 13%. But again, I'm just saying. So you're saying you think the discrimination for hiring is based off of that? Like, what do you think?
I don't really necessarily think crime has anything to do with it, but I mean,
With the supposed white privilege in hiring, you think it's more based on the simple logic of, oh, these people don't look like me, we're not the same?
Oh, you meant like as in like that's the reason why the prejudice may exist. Yeah, maybe people are more inclined to think that dark-skinned people are actually like criminal, which is actually true. There is data showing that that's true.
Okay. So let's go back. So you do think that there is discrimination in hiring? I mean, you think blacks can still get hired by a good, high-paying job. It's just less likely than a white person to get hired. But you're also admitting the possibility that they're discriminating is because of the higher crime rate?
It might be that you think that the employer might think that because a black person is black, they're more likely to steal from the business. Of course, again, this is pointed out in multiple studies showing that people are like, Like if you're a black man, for example, like, and this goes into the social capital thing more than it does economic, but I'm pretty sure this kind of plays a factor. But like if you're a black man and you're like tall, right? Like that's seen as a disadvantage because you're seen as more threatening rather than like a strong protector type like white people are.
Okay, gotcha. Some of these things I somewhat agree with you on. It's just, I guess we might have a different definition of privilege.
Well, why don't you give me your definition of privilege then?
Okay, so I watched a video on the supposed definition of privilege. I think it was some YouTube video called Counter Arguments. So...
Oh, brother, am I gonna have
so
to
I
make a
guess
response?
I think he was actually siding with you more on this video. I don't know if it's like centrist channel. I think it's slightly more liberal, just slightly, but more centrist. Agreed with all of his points on privilege covering everything, not just like white privilege, but privilege covering everything. And then he was like, oh, if you're tall, that's a privilege. If blank, this is a privilege. But he might have gotten the... I need to look up the definition of privilege too, because by definition it's something society grants you, right? It's nothing genetic.
So,
Anyways,
oh wait, go ahead, continue.
Well, if something is slight, I wouldn't really call it privilege. Like, sure, back in the day, obviously, if blacks can't eat in the same restaurant with you, that's for sure a privilege, and that's real discrimination. In my book, I mean, you're probably going to disagree with me here, and no one should discriminate strictly based on skin color, but I believe if you are doing the right thing, even if you're being discriminated against, like, it doesn't really matter. So, here, for example, so would you consider it a privilege if it takes you 5 or 10 more minutes at TSA because you're wearing a hijab or you're dressed like a Muslim? I wouldn't consider that a privilege because if you're doing the right thing, it doesn't really matter. It just takes you 10 more minutes to get through security. But,
so let's say that you had to go. Let's say that you were a doctor, and let's say that you had your turban on that day, and let's say that the TSA is searching you for 10 more minutes, and you've got to meet your patient like in the next few hours, and this 10 minutes can affect whether or not your gate gets switched to a later flight. Do you think now that this is like not? Do you think that as long as the person is doing the right thing, that this can't seriously impede on the effects of this person's flight, or no?
I don't think it does, man. Like, sure, there's always a hypothetical about how, oh, I need to get there right now, it's last 10 minutes. We can always come up with hypotheticals, but that's what I'm saying. So you would consider that a privilege, and maybe that's based off of things that have happened personally.
I consider it as in the privilege is that you don't have to go through that, not that you do. I just want to clear that up.
Sorry.
So, like, let's say, for example, if you're a white person and you're wearing, like, a cross on your neck, it's not going to be the same as if you're a Muslim and you're wearing a turban, because people are going to think you're a terrorist. I'm just saying that as an example. Like, the privilege there is that, you know, you're, like, even if you're, like, Muslim, right, and you just look like an Arabic person, you could be discriminated against in the airport, like, get searched a little bit longer. I think that could be considered a privilege, right? Like, you wouldn't be searched longer, right?
Yeah, that was my question I was asking, and you answered it. So, okay, yeah, you might get searched longer, but even if by definition it is, I don't think that's incredibly minor, because it's just a small amount of time. You can get stopped 10 minutes for anything, and it doesn't really matter, because, again, you might agree with me on this, I need to look for it, but statistically, are a Muslim and you're not...
I'm sorry, you cut out. Say that again?
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm saying I don't consider that a real privilege because statistically, I think you'd agree with me on this. Muslims are more likely to be terrorists. Obviously, out of all Muslims, that's still a very small amount. But it doesn't really matter if you're stopped for 10 minutes. I don't really consider that a real privilege. By your definition, you do consider that a privilege.
I consider the act of not being considered for being stopped for 10 minutes a privilege. Not being stopped for 10 minutes.
But we still all have to go through TSA.
Yes, but some of us have to go through longer than the other. I'm not trying to interrupt you, my bad.
You're good. I accidentally interrupt people, but I'm saying, so if that's your definition of privilege, I agree. There is a good chance a Muslim might have to be stopped longer. But I'm saying I don't see that as a big deal, because if they didn't do anything wrong, it just took a little longer. No one's in trouble. They're not gonna go to jail if they didn't do anything wrong. So I'm saying maybe this debate might just come down to
Maybe it might come down to what?
sorry, my phone blacked out. Saying I do agree that probably happens more often, but I also, some people might disagree with this, but I'm alright with okay, so let's flip this on me, because statistically I don't think this is true, but I've heard a lot of people make claims, oh, the white man is the biggest terrorist. Statistically, maybe it is. I'd have to look at the 2020 statistics, but if I was stopped for 10, consider that, I'm just saying by my definition, I wouldn't consider that a real legitimate privilege.
So,
because if you're not doing anything wrong, that's all that happened. It took you a few more minutes. But
hold on, you're cutting out.
Hold on for 2 seconds before I Is it because I'm taking my finger off the thing too early?
Like after you're after you're finished talking, hold it for like 2 seconds after you're finished.
Yeah, my bad. I remember you telling me that. But did you get what I was saying?
Could you go ahead and repeat it?
I'm basically just saying, so our original debate was over whether white privilege exists or racial privilege in general, and I'm saying, okay, maybe I do agree with your definition of white privilege. I'm not going to consider that a thing. I'm going to go off what the data says. So, like what we were talking about earlier, so if the data says that Muslims are more likely to be terrorists, obviously not all, and that's this simple thing is, okay, it takes them a little bit longer to get searched. I'm okay with that, and I don't see that as wrong. If that happened to me because white people were statistically more likely to do anything, I would understand. But if you personally aren't doing anything wrong, I don't see that as a privilege. That's basically what I'm saying.
How do you feel about things like stop and frisk?
I actually work at an airport, and I'm not with TSA, but I don't see anything wrong with it.
So, like, let's say, for example, that a black kid was just on the street walking home from the store, and the cop pulls up to him, tells him to, like, put his hands on a gate nearby, and he starts, going into this kid's pockets with no, priors, no reasonable suspicion, just going through this kid's pockets, feeling up on him, trying to find any sort of drug, and then, leaving afterwards. You think that that's completely okay, or that's a violation of your Fourth Amendment rights?
I don't know, is that legal? I mean...
No, it's not.
Well, yeah, if it's against the law, I'm definitely not for it. That doesn't sound right. But like I said, I've had very few scenarios with cops, but I actually work out with a lot of cops. That's not really relevant, but whatever. I've only been pulled over once, but I would have no problem, honestly, simply because I'm not in the wrong. But I guess if it was like a problem to where it happened really often and people were suspicious of me, but no, I think they're just trying to look out for everyone's safety. And if they check you and you don't have anything on you, well, you're fine. But again, if they're breaking the law by frisking you, no, I'm not for it.
So how do you feel about Donald Trump multiple times actually promoting the stop and frisk laws?
I don't pay that much attention to Donald Trump. I just quote him sometimes because he's kind of funny. But, well, wait, I'm sorry. Is this a different law? Because you said it's illegal, right?
Oh, it's illegal. He just promotes it. He says that this should be an actuality.
No, I'm definitely not for something that goes against your Fourth Amendment rights. No, that's not really for me. No, I'm probably with you on that.
Okay, do you know, like, there used to be a stop and frisk law actually in New York. Do you know the disproportionate effects of that law?
Sorry, could you repeat?
So, in New York, there was a stop and frisk law and had disproportionate effects amongst minorities. Do you know about this?
No, I haven't looked at the stats on that.
So pretty much what happened was a police officer could literally come up to you and search you, and what you found was that even though hold on, let me read this for a second. Okay, so like even though you know, like blacks, you know, they're such a small part of the population in New York. They're the like majority. Blacks and Hispanics were the literal majority of people getting stopped and frisked by these police officers. And the kicker is that there were barely any contraband found on these people, and all it was just cops running up to people and frisking them. That was pretty much it.
Do you know how recent this was?
So the case, I think it got ruled out in, like, I want to say 2014, something like that, but it still kind of goes on today. Like, the statistic I'm looking at shows, like, even though the law stopped, like, people are still getting frisked from still from 2017. Like, I'm not sure if it continued after 2017, but it's still, like, fairly kind of recent.
Okay, and you said this is against the law, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got to admit I'm kind of ignorant on that topic, but I don't see why it would still be happening that much if it's against the law. Obviously, I'm not for it unless somehow minorities, or specifically like in New York, were constantly stealing, like disproportionately, but yeah, I don't see a reason for that, especially if
So do you think, like,
Fourth Amendment rights.
so do you think, like, let's say, for example, let's say that we had a country full of redheads and blonde hairs, and let's say that redheads steal more than blonde hairs. Let's say that one day the blonde hairs decide, you know what, we're gonna make a law so that way we can run into anyone's home who's a redhead to make sure that they didn't steal anything. Would you call this law just because, or would you call this law right because redheads steal more, or would you call it wrong because even though redheads steal more, it's not right to just run into people's home without any prior cause?
No, I don't think you should be able to run into their house. Same way on the last one, I don't think you should be able to just randomly frisk someone if that goes against their rights. But if redheads do steal or cause more crime, I would be more suspicious. Well, it would have to be statistic. It wouldn't have to. I'm sorry. That's not the word I was looking for. It would have to be very disproportionate. It wouldn't be like a 45 to 55 ratio. It had to be very disproportionate. But if it was, then yeah, I'd be a lot more suspicious of redheads. But no, I don't think you should be able to barge into their house or frisk them unless there's like good evidence that they did something wrong.
Oh, okay. So did you want to move on, or did you want to stay on this?
Does this about cover the economic side? Did you want to talk about what was like,
actually we kind of dipped
in
into the political side, but we can talk about whatever part you want.
I don't pay that much attention to politics. We'll still go over it, but let's talk about the social part.
Sure, why not? Hold on.
Okay. So again, so I can know what I'm addressing, could you give me your definition of social white privilege or social privilege?
So I'm gonna give you my definition of white privilege, and then I'm gonna give you my definition of social capital. So white privilege, well, actually I said privilege, but I think I said privilege, but if I said white privilege, it'll go for both. So a privilege is an unearned advantage that you gain, and white privilege is typically characterized by unearned advantages that white people get just by virtue of being white and being the majority in America or in the country that they reside in, because they're white. So for example, in America, whites are the majority because they killed people who used to be the majority, and made them a minority. Literally, the Native Americans were the majority. They're not the majority anymore. So that's what I would mean by white privilege, as in you benefit from the privileges in this country because your white ancestors became the majority. Now, what I would describe as social capital would be how much, like, basically, this is gonna sound funny, but how much like clout you have, like how popular you are. You know, how can you garner respect and admiration in society. So, for example, if you're like tall, strong, you're known for like being smart, that would give you social capital.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean.
So for the social side, we can look at things like trust, for example. So dark-skinned people are actually less assumed to be innocent in terms of like criminal justice. They're considered less trustworthy, and medical professionals are less likely to treat their pain as serious as white people.
Okay, yeah. And you found data for all that as well?
Yes.
Okay, I see. So basically all of this in general comes down to, what we're trying to get at is the majority that does something, people are going to assume that as a whole. Would you agree?
What do you mean by the majority that does something?
So basically what this is coming down to is we're arguing that if a large amount of minorities do something wrong, you're saying that white people are going to assume all minorities do something wrong. Or not all, but they're going to be way more suspicious in hiring them and socially. That just seems like what this has come down to so far.
So what I'm saying is that there are
last one.
So what I'm saying is that there are certain like, for example, there are certain stereotypes, like blacks being more lazy. That's a stereotype that white people typically believe, and this affects us in different types of ways. So let's say, for example, if you think blacks are more criminal, I'm just saying this as an example, I'm not saying this is what the data says, but let's say, for example, you're a white doctor and you've grown up in upper middle class suburbia, and all you've heard of black people is that they're gangbangers and drug dealers. Let's say that one day some black guy comes into your clinic talking about his severe stomach pains. You're less likely to give him the medicine because of that prejudice that you have, because of the stereotypes that you've consumed over your life.
Sorry, you said you're saying if a doctor was less likely to treat a patient just because they're black?
Yeah, so like let's say a black guy walked into a doctor's office and he's talking about like abdominal pain, the doctor's less likely to give him like adequate pain medicine.
I mean, I don't think you can really do that. I mean, that's definitely sounds illegal, and for something just like abdominal pain, I'm pretty sure there's over-the-counter medicine that can help you with that. But yeah, I don't think you can really deny a patient. I just think it comes down to they can afford it or if there's health care. Also, can you still hear me fine?
Yeah, I can still hear you pretty good.
But that was a hypothetical, right? Or do you think there is some data saying...
No, there's data saying that. There's data saying that it's either that doctors recognize black pain, and I'm quoting here, doctors either recognize black pain but do not treat it, or they have concerns about access to healthcare or non-compliance. And that they also, no, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, maybe I'm just ignorant on this, but I've never heard of a doctor denying someone healthcare simply based on because they're black. I've never heard of that.
I don't think it's
I don't think that's illegal.
I don't think it's like, oh, you get out of my office, Starkey, like you're not allowed here. I think it's more like you walk in and the doctor's like, oh, this guy's obviously faking. He's gonna go take these pain pills I'm giving him and turn him out on the streets. Let me get him out of here. Like that's probably what it is. I'm just saying that as a hypothetical to make it more like reasonable, like for you to understand.
Okay, so you think they're denying them medicine because they might be abusing the medicine like a drug?
Yeah, I'm saying that like because
I'm just asking, is it?
I'm saying that because like maybe it's a stereotype thing. Like maybe they unironically believe that blacks are more likely to take drugs and sell them and stuff, and because of that stereotype and that belief, they will resist black people access to medication. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I'd have to look at that. Again, this is partially my fault. I had time to look over more data. I really should have, but to my knowledge, most over-the-counter medicine can just help you with stomach pain anyways. So, I don't know what specific medicine you would need for stomach pain, but yeah, I don't know.
So actually, hold on. Let's make it let's make a quick scenario for this. Let's say that you had a chronic pain condition. Let's say that you got into a car accident like a couple of years ago, and like your spine's not the same ever since. Like maybe they could give you like a spinal surgery, but you couldn't actually get it because you couldn't afford it, and now you walk around with chronic pain. Let's say that one day your back gets into like a spasm or something, and you go to the hospital and you're asking for like, hey, can I get some like Percocet or something? And the doctor thinks that you're gonna sell it out on the streets, and they'll deny you the Percocet and just give you some over-the-counter medicine and say you're just overreacting, you're being a baby, and they send you out.
Okay, if there is data to back that up, I would admit that's a legitimate privilege versus the last ones, which I would disagree with, but I would like to look at this data saying doctors potentially deny blacks or Latinos medicine because they're suspicious they'll abuse it. But
yeah, I'll send you I'll send you the Google Doc when we're done with the conversation. Don't worry about it.
Okay, if it's legitimate, then I might have to agree with you on that. But yeah, I'd have to look over it and I'd show it to some people, see if anyone's analyzed it. But okay, that's definitely interesting. So this is what I'm saying. If there is proof to that, I would agree that's a legitimate privilege if that's true, versus just someone stereotyping you. I don't really see, that doesn't really matter. I don't consider that a real privilege. But if something affects your health, I do consider that a real privilege. So, okay, that's interesting. But yeah, anyways, I'd have to see the study.
Sure. So how do you feel about like the police?
Um, so like I said, I've had very little trouble with cops, and again, the statistic around, I don't to sound like a jerk or anything, and I don't mean to be racist in my come out, but if blacks do cause more violent crime, obviously they're going to have more run-ins with the police, so that just kind of makes sense to me. And I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I don't really get into trouble. I don't do drugs, any drugs, even like minor drugs, I've never assaulted anyone, and wouldn't you know, I never get in trouble with the police. The only run-in I've ever had with the police, I got pulled over for a broken tail light, and the cop was black, actually. So that's another thing, a lot of cops are black. And he simply told me to get it fixed, and I got it fixed in a few more days. And if someone... So yeah, basically I just believe that. I mean, even suspicious of you, it doesn't really matter if you're not doing anything wrong. No, I don't believe only going after blacks. I don't believe that.
So if you don't mind me asking, what like environment did you grow up in? Like, what would you say like your socioeconomic status was like growing up? Like middle class, upper middle class, lower middle class?
I'm not exactly sure. I'd probably say upper middle class, probably. But yeah, and you might, and I don't know how much that has to do with it, but I just don't see how you can get in trouble with the police if you're not doing anything.
So like when you were like
That's basically what I'm saying.
so when you were like a kid and stuff, like you had like friends to play outside with, you had extracurricular activities at school and stuff to do?
No, I was pretty lame. I was mostly at home playing games.
Playing like video games, right? Like you had things to do.
Yeah, a little bit.
So like this is like a, not to like sound funny, but like what did your parents do for work, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, totally. I don't care. My dad, he actually recently got laid off. That's funny, but now he's doing something similar. He worked for Walker for about 20 years. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
What's Walker?
They sell car parts. He worked with them.
Oh, so he was like a salesman or some kind.
Yeah, and my mom, she made jewelry. She still does it a little bit. Nothing crazy, not like diamonds, but she does like a lot of coral, sapphire. She makes jewelry and sapphire. That's not what I meant either. But coral and what's the other one? I don't know, but some other kind of stuff. And currently, she doesn't do that as much. Now she's a flight attendant. But yeah, that's their jobs.
So, would you say that your parents are like like when you were a kid, would you say that your parents were like relatively well off?
Yeah, I'd say I'm pretty well off. I've had struggles as a kid, but no, I've never had any real financial issues. I mean, they're not filthy rich, but they have a nice size house. I never like missed a meal. So yeah, upper middle class.
What type of struggles do you think you had? Like what type of like maybe like bullying or something, or like maybe you had like troubles with girls or something?
Yeah, just bullying. Nothing I think directly related to but yeah, just like bullying. Also, like I hated school, bro. I still hate school, and again, some people might say this is a privilege. It has nothing to do with society, but I just naturally never did well in school. I always hated it. Some people naturally gravitate towards school and certain types of learning. But yeah, it's something I just always hated. I always hated the environment. But yeah.
So let's make it like a little hypothetical. Let's reverse your situation almost completely. Let's say that your mom worked at like a grocery store at something making like $15 an hour, and then she had to do shifts at the then she had to pull shifts at the local restaurant to make a quick buck, so that way she could put fit dinner on the table. But sometimes you didn't really know when you were gonna eat. Sometimes you had to like get food, like scavenge food. Maybe like you had to eat like 3-month-old crackers. You ate, but like it wasn't good food, like it wasn't healthy stuff that you could like like you would subsist off of. Let's say that you're going to school, let's say you're going to school, you're having problems with bullying, and you don't really have any money, you can't get really good clothes, can't get like a girlfriend. Let's say that you don't know necessarily, like your mom's breaking down, like can't pay the bills. Let's say that one day some guy approaches you and is like, hey man, I've been noticing you, little homie. Let's say that you ride with us, and you go with them on a few car rides, you go to the mall, get some clothes and stuff. Let's say that one day he gives you a bandana and a gun and tells you to go kill someone, and you're initiated into the gang, and you say, oh, alright, sure. And you go and you kill someone, you go into this gang. Now you have protection from bullies. Now you have an entire squad that you're gonna be able to get money with. You're gonna be able to hit licks. If you don't know what that means, it just means getting money really quickly, whether it be a robbery or just selling drugs or something. And let's say that you're doing this for a while. Let's say that one day you get you get hemmed up by the police and you get thrown in jail for 20 years of, let's say, possession. I'm not sure the actual rates of possession. Let's say that someone then like comes after you come out after 20 years and you're trying to go get a job. Someone's like, well, it's really your own fault. Like you joined that gang. Would you say that there weren't certain factors that were pushing this person more likely to join this gang than it would be if they were in your particular situation?
No, I agree with you there, but at the end of the day, that's what I'm saying. Everything that's on paper, so like everything you just said on paper sounded a lot worse, but at the end of the day, it's still, I think people should take responsibility. It's still your choice. Yeah.
Yeah, but that person didn't make the choice to not be able to eat, to not be able to defend themselves from bullies, to not be able to, get money, like, and have a good job. Like, that person didn't make that choice. It was just, like, something that was thrown into their lap. You got all those things, besides the bullying part. Like, you got a nice house, you got to eat, you knew that you were gonna get a meal every day. Like, you got all those things. And for you to, like, turn around and tell the person who did what they needed to do to survive that it's really, like, ultimately their fault that they had to go to jail because the system was in place that made it harder for them to get, like, food and resources. Don't you think that's a little bit, like, harsh, and that we can do a little bit more to just help these people instead?
But you said the guy that joined the gang shot someone and had drugs on them.
Yeah, they shot someone and killed someone, yeah, but like they never got caught for that one, assumedly in my example. And two, they did that to survive. So, most likely this gang was probably going to kill this person if they didn't do it. And this person most likely knew that they were going to be able to have a substantial income and they were going to be able to get food and protection if they joined this gang.
That's hypothetical that I don't believe really happens. No, I think everyone has a choice. I don't think the gangs really... No, I don't believe that. I believe what you said earlier, yes, obviously, if someone has a nicer house, their parents make more money, and if they have food, obviously, yeah, they have better privileges than someone who doesn't, which I'm assuming you're going to say that's more common amongst blacks versus whites.
Yes, that
true.
Whites are more likely to be like middle class, yeah.
But that still happens on both sides, so I don't think that's called a white privilege, because that still happens on both sides, even though it's more likely.
Well, sure, but whites are more likely to have this because of the massive amount of generational wealth built up by the fact that segregation happened, in which black people couldn't even get jobs that white people could get. We couldn't build the wealth that white people could build.
I mean, I don't necessarily believe that.
How do you not believe that when it was literal, like, enshrined in the law that you could be discriminated against with job hiring discrimination, as in you could get denied a job just because you were black?
Yeah, back then that was real, but I don't have any generational wealth. Yeah, my
So,
parents had money. They don't just give me money.
well, no, but
Everything I
like,
had.
aren't you like, if your parents, not to sound grim, like, but if your parents died today, like, do you think you would get like the house, a substantial inheritance at least?
Yeah, if they died, they're more likely not gonna die for a really long time though.
Yeah, so like let's say for example, like in 20 years, you're not really doing the best, you're living in like a really crappy apartment. And let's say maybe your mother and father like die in a car crash. Not to sound too grim, but like let's say they die in a car crash. Do you think you'd get enough money to like get up off your feet and get onto your feet and like, have a better life for yourself?
I mean, yeah, I'd have a lot of money, but again, my parents don't just give me free handouts. Yeah, I'd get their inheritance if they passed. I don't know how much they have exactly.
So let's say like you were going to college, right? And you flunked out of college and you needed to go back home. Do you think that you would have a place to stay at your parents' house?
Uh, Again, another hypothetical, but maybe. I mean, right now, still trying to look for somewhere to move out, but yeah.
Yeah, so basically what I'm trying to say with these hypotheticals is that you already have massive amounts of privilege. Now, I'm not saying that every single one of these things are because you're white. I'm saying that a lot of them are because you're white, because a lot of the time, back before, you were discriminated against for being black, and today, you're sort of kind of discriminated against for being black. But a lot of it is just like social, economic, and political privileges that we talk about every day, but we don't recognize them as privileges. For example, voting. Voting is a huge constitutional right, and some people are stopped more than others when it comes to voting.
No, like I said, I agree. Privilege is a thing. It's not a real physical thing. It's a concept. I have more privileges than some kid in Africa, and so do you. And people that have way more cash and that and there's people that are way more privileged than me. I just disagree that that's white privilege. The only thing I agree with you that could potentially be white privilege is that statistic you said earlier, is if...
Hold on, let me go to the bathroom real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Alright, I'm back.
Okay, where are we talking about? Okay, I think I was saying that, again, I don't think those things are white privilege. I know that you think they are, and I've heard that claim before, but I don't think they are, because that just goes back to, I mean, anyone can add that. I can name plenty of black people richer than me. Well, famous ones, not ones that I know, but plenty of black people that are richer than me.
How to the like? Let's make it like a ratio thing. Like, what ratio of black people are rich compared to the ratio of white people? Like, just like a ballpark number. Could you think that up off your head?
I don't have the statistic on that, but I would assume it would be white people. I'm not sure, but then again, we can just go back to Jews are probably far richer on average, and same with Asians. And I don't really see how being an immigrant affects that. But
Well, so like one, like I don't know. I'd probably largely consider Jews white people. I don't know. Like I think Jews like an ethnicity more than like a race thing. I don't think race biologically exists that differentiates us. But more importantly, like these Jews like have it. Huh?
Well, it's an ethno-religion. It's kind of both. I was just saying that's an example, and a lot of people don't consider them white. But I was just saying them along with Asians, they tend to test higher on terms of wealth and in terms of IQ. They can still be white.
So I mean, like Jews, I'm not 100% sure, but this would be my guess. Jews seem to have a particular like culture that like makes them so insular, yet they get a lot of money because of it. So for example, a lot of Jewish people own like certain types of businesses that make massive profits or something like that. That's what I've like generally seen, but I have no like data to back that up. So just take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, they're really greedy.
You're pushing dog whistle territory here.
Oh, sorry. What were you saying before, though? Yeah, skip that.
Bad optics. But no, seriously. Yeah, like we have these. Like, I mean, like, hold on. Let me look through my list of things that we could talk about, and let me come back to you for like a second, okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have two things here. We could talk about either the voter ID laws of North Carolina, in which the voter people, I forgot what they're called, but they literally admitted to targeting blacks because they vote Democrat, versus the drug war, which, as noted by John L. Richmond, was literally started just to target blacks and the left.
Okay, I'll hear what you have to say. But again, voting, that's another thing I don't really consider a privilege because I don't even vote, and I don't think voting really matters. But
well, no, it's just a privilege as in, like, you're the majority, so most likely the people who are your skin color will share your views and will vote in the way you vote. So your policies that you want to push are more likely to get pushed. A great example of this is, let's use another hypothetical, but I think this proves the point. Let's say, for example, that you're in the middle class, slightly upper middle class sort of deal here, and you're white, and your white neighbors and you want to vote to keep the power plants that power your city in the lower income areas. Well, now you're going to have increased power consumption, right? And you're going to have more pollution in the black neighborhoods, which that has actually been substantiated by data that even though they don't consume that much power, blacks and Latinos are more likely to be exposed to pollution due to the power plants.
okay, so you want to vote on that? Yeah.
So sure, so things like the North Carolina voter ID laws don't help at all. Have you ever heard of this?
Nope. Not until what you were telling me now. Well, generally when I hear about white privilege, I don't hear about these things that you're bringing, which I'm glad you're bringing them up because I've actually never heard these arguments. You're saying usually when people say white privilege, they just say something stupid like, well, you agree with it, sorry, I don't want to call it stupid, but they say something and they don't have any data to back it up, they just say it. But I'm looking into these claims because you have the data, but no, I've never heard of this ID law in North Carolina.
Oof, so I get to explain it right away. So what happened in North Carolina was a violation of our constitutional rights. So pretty much what happened was the North Carolina voter people, I have no idea. I have no idea what they're called, but this is what happened. I'm not bullshitting you. Apparently, they had it in their mind one day. That they wanted the votes to lean more right. So they decided, since blacks are a huge portion of the Democratic vote, that they would unironically stop the ways that black people vote. For example, black people voted earlier than white people did. So they shortened the time span where you could vote earlier from 3 weeks to like 1 week. And they actually stopped the types of IDs that black people use, which black people didn't use DMV IDs, like, so they didn't use IDs from like driver's license. They stopped those IDs in particular. And what the Supreme Court had found, because the Supreme Court ruled on this case and said that it was unconstitutional, what the Supreme Court had found is that the voter people decided to look up the statistics on race of voters, and they decided to implement laws based on race to stop blacks from voting. So I just wanted, tell me, to the fact that a government, the state, would think to do this to black people in particular, the fact that they thought to do that doesn't that kind of show a level of there was a chance that we could get away with this, that kind of disturbs you a bit?
Well, yeah, everyone knows that our government to some extent is corrupt, yeah. Everyone talks about that, but Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked into that law. Again, I'm not really political. I don't really vote. But yeah, if they specifically targeted black people to stop them from voting, I can see how you would call that a form of privilege against someone.
So you would consider yourself like apolitical, as in like actually taking action, as in you don't like vote for like issues and stuff?
I have conservative views, but yeah, I'm apolitical as in I don't really vote. I don't watch political debates, but my views are very conservative. But in terms of this politician and voting, I'm more. I voted once, like I think I already told you this. I voted for Trump back in 2016. Now I don't really care. I just did it to vote because I just turned 18. But now I don't really care. So, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately I don't turn 18 this year, but I will next. So I could kind of make an argument based on what you just told me that you operate under white privilege. So you remember the Colin Kaepernick kneeling down for the national anthem thing?
Yeah, I remember that.
So there's this guy, I forgot his name. I think it was like Dave Rubin, but this is like a general argument. But Dave Rubin, if you ever look up the video, illustrates this perfectly. Where he was sitting there and he was like, I don't understand, guys. Why can't you just like not do politics? I want to watch my sports and not think about politics. And when I sat there and I watched that, I was just like really thinking like, wow, how great must it be? Like, not to sound too patronizing, but like, how great must it feel to be like white and just be like, you know what, I want this day not to consider my race in politics, because that's kind of what's always talked about when we talk about other races that aren't really white in politics nowadays. For example, like you were saying earlier, crime. Like there are Republicans who justify the idea of stop and frisk against black people because our race commits more crime per capita, or papers please laws, which again are unconstitutional according to the Fourth Amendment, that Republicans consider because, you know, it will stop illegal immigration supposedly. So these laws that we have to constantly think about as black and brown people, white people don't really have those types of issues. Like there's never going to be like a law where it's like, hey, you're a white person, put like here $3 for your privilege check bar or else you're going to jail. Like there's never really going to be a law like that. Like, would you agree or no?
I'm sorry, you were talking about Colin Kaepernick and then you brought up something else. I misunderstood or a little bit. Could you repeat the last part?
Sure. So like when Dave Rubin made a comment like, I just want to watch my sports, I don't want to talk about politics, it was kind of indicative of a privilege you have, where if you're a white person, you can like turn your brain off for a day and not think about politics. Whereas if you're a black and brown person, like that, you have to know what's going on. If you want to be a voter, if you want to like participate in like the democracy, if you want to live and survive your everyday like life and not get like interrupted by like being followed around in the grocery store, being stopped and frisked, or being asked for your papers if you look Hispanic, you have to be on politics every single day. You can't like be fidgety around the police or else you're more likely to get shot. Like that's just it. Like for black people and brown people, it's not the same with white people. Like you guys get that breath of fresh air like every day. Like, oh, I don't have to think about politics today. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but I don't believe that. I mean, it's fine if you think that, but I don't believe what you're saying is true. And if Colin Kaepernick wants to kneel, I don't really care. If he wants to bring up politics, I don't really care. But again, everything you just said, I disagree with that. That goes back to what we were talking about before. I do not believe police are out to do that, to constantly frisk people. I mean, a lot of this also probably has to do with what state are you in?
Florida.
Oh, really? Okay, so you're down south as well. But okay, well, I'm from Texas. I'm actually not there now, but I don't know. It probably has. Are they more left or right over there?
I don't know. There's a lot of Cubans over here, so probably more right-leaning.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Maybe it just has to do with what we're taught in our household. I know Miami has a lot of crime, right? I don't know if you're from Miami, but yeah.
Yeah, a lot of major cities have a lot of crime, yeah.
Yeah, same with where I'm from. Houston has a ton of crime, but I don't know. I just don't really see it. I don't really get involved, and I just don't feel that. I just disagree with your statement saying white people have a privilege to not get involved with politics while blacks and Hispanics have to because they're constantly being targeted. I just disagree with that, and I highly doubt there's data to back that up. I mean, again, I've never heard of frisk laws. Again, I'll have to ask my friends that are cops. I'll have to ask them about that,
But why would you ask your friends who are cops who could give a possibly biased view when you could look up the data?
okay, what's the data?
The data is that when you do implement stop and frisk, first it's unconstitutional. That's like big, but secondly, usually people just use it to target blacks and browns. Like usually it just disproportionately affects Latinos and blacks. That's usually what happens.
Okay, well, I've never seen that happen, and I've never heard of it happen, and I don't see how it happened in a real setting. So the majority of people I work with are black. I don't see how they'd even be around a cop at a certain time. I mean, I go to work, I go to work out, I go home. I just don't see what scenario a cop could come up and frisk me. And
So let's say like you were walking to the store, maybe you had your hoodie up, the cop ran up to you, says, "Hey son, go by that wall, spread your hands out, spread your legs, let me feel you, see if you have any drugs on you, boy." Like, you wouldn't feel like that cop was just like, just bothering you at all?
There aren't any cops here. I mean, for anyone, like I've never walked next to HEB, and I've never seen a cop frisking a black or Hispanic person.
Well, this happened in Texas. This didn't happen in Texas. It happened in New York. But more importantly, like this is a kind of like proof of what I just said. Like the fact that you don't see this thing happening in your community kind of shows that you live in this area where it's like safe, and people generally get to live their day-to-day lives, and there isn't all this crime and police brutality and stuff like that. Like you don't see it.
No, I don't really see it at all. Like I said, I think all this stuff on the news and all this is just overhyped. I think it's very rare. And again, this happened on the news to like one person, or this happens all the time. That's what this supposed data says.
So the data says that when you implement laws like stop and frisk, it usually is just implemented to target black and brown people.
But you said that's not a law. You said it's illegal, correct?
Yeah, I said when it's implemented. It used to be implemented, and now it's gone because the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional. Yet our idiot president, Trump, that you helped vote in, supports this law. So, yeah, that's a real worry I have to think about. Like, one day, like, if the governor of Florida decides, hey, guys, we're going to start a lawful stop and frisk, like, I have to worry about, like, if I'm walking home from school, a cop driving up to me, throwing me against the fence, and feeling me up trying to find drugs. I have to literally worry about that because our idiot president.
Have you gotten pulled over before?
No, I've been stopped by a cop before. Not like while driving or anything, but I've been stopped by a cop before. The cop didn't like me that much, I'll say that much.
Did you get away with it?
I didn't do anything wrong, so no. The cop left, but I didn't do anything wrong. He was just bothering me for no reason.
Well, I mean, that's messed up, but still, nothing really happened then, right?
Well, no, it's just like a problem that I have to deal with as a, not to be like woke SJW here, but like as a young black male, like that's a problem I have to deal with. Like I'm always going to be looked at in society as a bigger, stronger person that can do more harm. Like, that's not a positive spin. There's data showing that when you're big and strong as a black male, you're seen as threatening, but when you're big and strong as a white male, you're seen as like a protector or someone who's like good and like competent and smart and stuff. Like, it's actually shown. And it's kind of amazing to me how we can look at all these factors, like societally, politically, and economic, and we can look at these things and we can actually like find like these disparities in the way people think. Like if me and another white person of the same size, same weight, same look, same haircut walked into a room, I'm seen as bigger and stronger than he is because I'm looked at as more threatening. Don't you think that's kind of crazy?
I mean, if that's true, yeah. But again, this goes back to, I don't think it really matters as long as you get away with it and you still come home safe. But no, you shouldn't discriminate. Have you only had one run-in with the cops? That one that you said he was just bothering you, or do they bother you all the time?
So like I've had one run-in with like the actual like police, but like security guards, yeah, security guards are not my friends. There's a common experience in the black community called shopping while black. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
So basically, like, you can be a guy just walking around the store. Like, you could be a white guy, right, with a hoodie, walking around the store, no one will bother you. You could be a black guy walking in the store. Maybe you have, just a regular t-shirt, jeans on, walking around the store, and some 50-year-old like female security guard is looking at the male's underwear section, obviously watching your every move while in the store. Like, it's very annoying and upsetting that when I go into a store to like maybe go pick up something for my mom, maybe I'm doing a bit of grocery shopping, that I'm gonna be followed around in the store just because people assume because of my race that I'm gonna be stealing.
Okay, well, I don't know. Again, I can't say anything. I don't really pay attention to everyone else when I go grocery shopping, but I mean, yeah, they shouldn't stereotype, but again, that's something that, have they like addressed you, like as you're shopping, they went up and said, hey, did you take something? Did you pay for that? Or you just think they're watching you?
A few times I've been looking at something and someone says something like, hey, do you need help, sir? And that's the second time they said it, and it's literally just them making their presence known, like, don't steal. And there were a few times where someone says, if you break it, you buy it. And there was one time where explicitly someone says, hey son, you better not steal. Like, it's pretty obvious what they're getting at when they come up to me and make comments like this. Obviously they're making comments saying, hey, we're watching you, don't steal. Like, do you really need to do that? I don't know.
Okay. I mean, that's your experience, I guess.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about my experience. We could just, like, go back to the data. So is there anything you wanted to talk about specifically, like any questions you had about, like any, like, thing you thought I might have to bring up?
Okay, well, again, mainly, I mean, I agree with what you said. This ultimately comes down to the data. The main one that I would like to look at that could actually be a real privilege is someone denying you medicine. I admit if that data is true, I would call that a legitimate privilege. Everything else you've said, I'm not trying to like sound like a jerk or anything, but I don't consider someone watching you at a store, even if you are innocent and they're stereotyping you, or a cop saying something to you, I don't consider that a real privilege, because it's just inconvenient, but you're not actually in trouble. So I don't consider that a privilege, but I would like to see the statistics on all of these, and I would, especially the one on the medicine, denying you medicine, that is, and also, and again, some of these because I scrolled through some of the ones you put in the comments for your last video. Some of them, I think, could be explained a little bit, like they weren't even directly related to housing and like.
What do you think can be explained by other factors besides the race?
Well, I think there's always. Well, again, I think a part of it comes down to stereotyping, but again, the stereotypes might also be based off the data, and we already talked about that earlier. And then there's just the general idea of a lot of people gravitate towards what they're like. So, for all we know, this could be the same as a Chinese person in China, Japanese person in Japan, English people in, England, but yeah.
So you're saying that like you're looking for like white privilege like worldwide? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying even if someone simply gravitates towards someone who looks more like them, that's everywhere. That's not a United States thing. That's probably every country.
Sure, but a lot of that can be fixed socially. Like, for example, let's say, because I think this has been borne out in data, like when you're like a young child, you gravitate more towards the race that has taken care of you since your birth. Like, for example, let's say a white kid grows up with a black family, they're more likely to like black people, etc., etc. We could rub this out, if you will, like socially. Make more inclusive schools, make more inclusive environments for people who are not the majority or non-white or minorities and such.
Well, I mean, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Of course, you're going to gravitate towards whoever raised you. Yeah, that just makes sense.
So you keep mentioning Asians. Can we talk about that for a bit, actually?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Wait, you want me to bring up something, or you had like a specific question?
I mean, like how about you give me like your overview of why you think Asians have more money and resources and stuff, and then I'll talk about my side of it, I guess.
Okay, sure. This is my view. Again, I'm not trying. A lot of what I'm saying is based off the data. I can also link this to you later in the comments, and I'll find it. It's somewhere online, or my brother can give it to me. But I do think that Asians, on average, have some of the highest IQs. Again, like with Jews, and I think that's partially related to their success and why they make a lot of money.
Not to cut you off, do you think that IQ and race are like interconnected? Like, if you're a certain race, you're destined to have a certain IQ, or do you think it's an educational thing and an environment thing?
I don't think it's directly related. Obviously, I'm not that smart. I'll say right off the bat, I'm not that smart. But on average, that's the key word, average. I do think on average Asians are some of the smartest. And there is data to prove this. I do not have it on me, but I've looked at it before, and I will link it to you later.
Sure, yeah, the IQ thing, those IQ studies can actually be put into question because many of the people who do them, I forgot what his name is. Was it Rushton? Something like that. But, apparently, several, universities and other people who have, analyzed the data found, for the African, not the African American, but, for the African thing, for the African study for itself, like what Rushton did was he literally would go to like farms where they didn't even have schools, and he would test their IQs, and even when they had like higher than like 80 or IQs, he would just throw out the data and say it's unrealistic. So there might be slight bias with those IQ stats, but let's roll with them anyways. So we've noted, you agree with this, right? That most Asians that come into the U.S. are already slightly above like upper middle class, and already are already usually are rich and have some level of educational attainment to even get here, right?
Okay, sure, maybe.
Sure. So don't you think that maybe the reason why blacks and Latinos may have lower IQs is not because, some genetic factor or because of something like that, but more likely it's because of the environments that they grew up in?
That before, I believe, and again, none of what I'm saying matters until I actually find the data, and if I say something here that's wrong, I'll take it back if it's not with the data, but I believe it's been checked with children that have not been educated, like very young children that haven't been educated at all, and are just strictly on what they can figure out, and they take the average of that race, what the children can do at that time. And apparently these tests have been done for a very long time.
Well,
but
sure.
I could be wrong.
Well, sure, but
I'm sorry. Can I finish a bit?
Oh no. Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, but what you're saying could make sense. I do like that you kind of do seem to have an answer for some of these things that I would like to look into, because a lot of what you're saying is new to me and I've never heard, which is good for me to expand a little bit. No, to my knowledge, they've been tested on young children that have not been educated. It's just based on strictly like their IQ, what they can do at that age, and these tests go back to the early 1900s. But yeah, I'll link them later.
So sure, even for like young children, like I'm gonna give out another hypothetical, but some of it is based on data, so you'll be happy. So let's say that we have a single mother black woman, and let's say that we have a average family white people. Okay, let's say that the single mother drops her kid off to daycare. She works a few jobs. She comes, picks him up at like maybe 4, and they spend the rest of the day together. Okay. Now let's say that the white family, the dad goes to work and the mom stays home. The mom has more likely of a chance to be talking to the kid, engaging with him, making sure that he has adequate food and adequate toys and educational things to play with. But the black kid really, again, just thrown into an environment where most likely he won't be getting the treatment that he needs to fully develop into more what's the word I'm looking for? More well-rounded individual. So when you look at these things, and also there's the data part of it, where you can actually look and you see, like this was from the CDC, apparently there's actually more lead in the like in the areas that black and Latinos live in, where for example, like 50 years ago or something like that, some crazy statistic shows like when you reduce lead levels, you actually reduce crime. Like I have to actually look up the data on that. I just heard that, but I mean it seems to be true because it's shown that like lead literally changes you. Like it actually makes you more violent, lower IQ, less like comprehensive. Like lead destroys your brain. And things that happen in like Flint, Michigan are perfect examples of the things that wrapping this back up to the points where we have to, like as like black and brown people, we have to talk about politics, because if we don't, stuff like that will happen in Flint, Michigan, where all that water got destroyed because of the lead. The kids and people who drink that water, they're fucked for life. Like you don't get back from lead poisoning. Any real heavy metal poisoning, you don't recover from that. That fucks your life up forever.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, I get clean water is definitely a privilege. I admit that. Anyone else compared to someone in Michigan, yeah. Having clean water, I admit that. It's a good thing.
So hold on. Let's talk about like 3 more topics and we'll wrap it up, okay?
Okay, sure.
Hold on. Let's see here. We have.
Did you have something, or you wanted me to bring it up?
Yeah, hold on. Give me a second. Well, actually, you bring up the first one. I'm gonna let you bring up the first one.
Okay. I mean, I guess the topics I wanted to bring up have mainly been talked about. Again, I just think, as a whole, this concept, I don't think it's a real thing. I mean, obviously, again, I'll change my mind on that. Like I said, because some of the data you've said sounds interesting. And usually when I bring this up, I've heard no good arguments. But if the data you're saying is real, that is a pretty good argument. But just as a whole, like, that somehow, well, okay, do you think this racial privilege is like a United States thing only, or what?
Well, I think it's more of like a Western world thing. Like, if you live in like places like the United States, Canada, Europe, Australia, if you live in places like that, like if you're white, you're more likely to have like privileges. Like, that's it. Like, that's like just for like the social thing in and of itself. Like, you're definitely more likely to have more privilege if you're white in these countries. I'm not sure for everywhere else in the world, like China or Africa or like other Asian and African and Caribbean countries. I'm not completely sure.
So basically you mean United States, Canada, and Europe?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So not really everywhere, just other majority white countries.
Yeah, places with like huge global dominance and control and influence. Like, how the US completely built up Japan after World War II. Like, places like that with that much power to like throw at a country like, here, we'll just rebuild the entire thing after we've destroyed you during World War II. Like, yeah, I'd say these countries have like white privilege, yeah.
Well, those countries are majority white though, so...
Yes, exactly. That's a privilege. Like, because you're white and because you've decimated local populations like Native Americans in both Canada and America, you now have the privilege to be the majority and have the most political power. Yeah, that's privilege.
But all countries have, like, totally destroyed the local minorities.
Well, they weren't minorities before whites rolled in, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
But, like, that's just a normal thing. Like, it's messed up, but, now is now. And, like, pretty much every country has just wiped out the local, whoever inhabited it, and there's been slavery. That's just, like, kind of common all across every country. And again, I don't think there's white privilege in Japan. I just think, or is there Japanese privilege in Japan? I don't think so. I just think it's kind of how everyone sees it. Like, almost everyone there is like Japanese, and of course if they see someone else, they're probably not going to hate them, but they're going to feel differently towards them. That's just kind of natural.
Well, so I'm not 100% sure if like there's like Japanese or like white privilege in Japan, but there are two stereotypes, not stereotypes, but one of them is a stereotype, but there are two things that happen that I want to talk about there. So one of the things that happened like right after World War II and like kind of during it was Japanese women were marrying American men and American soldiers like en masse, and the reasons why they were doing it was because they wanted to escape like the destruction of Japan. Like, they wanted to escape that, but that's not really neither here nor there. The real thing I wanted to talk about is the idea that the white man, I hope this doesn't trigger you, but like the white man is the goal. Like, a lot of like foreign cultures, for example, you see this in Latino culture all the time. There's something called colorism, where in like Latino and Caribbean countries, like, you'll have it where dark-skinned like Hispanics are treated worse than light-skinned Hispanics. And this is actually one of my like huge data points that I think like proves the social part of white privilege, is that darker-skinned people are like seen as like less trustworthy and more likely to be criminals than lighter-skinned people. It's just one of those things that like okay, like come on, there has to be there. This is obviously like white privilege. Like this is white privilege right here. Like I don't know.
I mean, yeah, it's just how people view you, I guess.
Sure. Okay. So hold on. Let me bring up the thing that I wanted to talk about right now. Ah, yes, here it is. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about Papers, Please. Have you heard of this?
No, I had. Well, I'm sorry. Say it one more time.
Papers, Please.
No, I've never heard of that.
So this was a law, and I'm not joking around here. This was a law that made it so that way, like, if you were a police officer, right, and you saw, like, a Hispanic guy, like, just driving around in his car, you could pull him over, walk up to his car, or, like, if this guy was walking on the street, and you can unironically ask him for identification papers to make sure that he wasn't an illegal immigrant.
Okay.
So, like, you're chill with that? Like, that's a... Not to be like sound like a broken record, but that's literally a constitutional violation.
I mean, it doesn't really make any sense why it'd be allowed if it's a constitutional violation.
I'm saying that laws like this have been tried and implemented before, and again, Trump supports this law. So our president has the ability to back people who can implement these laws. This is what I'm talking about when I say white privilege exists, at least in the political idea, because you can have it where these laws are illegal and stupid and unconstitutional, but because white people voted in Trump, like, you know, it's like I guess like now, like if I'm out with a Hispanic friend, like he's supposed to be like thrown up against the fence and told, hey, give me your identification papers, like. Oh.
I mean, again, I'm not for that if it's against your constitutional rights, but again, if you're totally legal and you have your papers, it doesn't really matter.
Well, I think, like, whether or not you're legal or not, like, is besides the point. Like, the fact that a cop can walk up to you because you're Hispanic looking, like, you may be, like, a Cuban, like, a white person who's got, like, maybe a Cuban grandmother, and you get thrown up against a wall and told to give your ID or else you're going to jail and, like, possibly called to ICE and getting deported because you don't have your proper identification papers with you. Like, maybe, like, you went out to the store to buy something and you just brought cash and not your wallet and you forgot your license in, like, the house. Like, that's it. Like, I'm going to jail now, fuck. Like, that's kind of fucked up to me, right? Like, no, yes, no.
I mean, if you don't have your papers, then you probably are illegal, to my knowledge. But if you can show them your proper identification, it's probably just fine. So, but again, this isn't the law now, anyways, right? So, I don't know. It doesn't really matter.
Well, it's not the law now, but Trump supports laws like this. So these laws, if he's elected for like 2020, like these laws can be put into actuality. Like we could have like a governor, like let's say like Arizona or Alabama or something. We can have a governor be like, you know what, we're gonna do these laws again. We're gonna do Papers, Please again. You know, we got to get them illegals out there. They're raping murderers and they're killing people. Like they could do that now. Like Trump would just chill with that.
I mean, I'd have to look at the data, but I'm sure a lot of illegal immigrants coming in are rapists and murderers, so...
No, that's factually not true.
Are you sure about that?
I'm 100% sure. There have been multiple studies showing that illegal immigrants don't commit that much crime. They actually commit less crime and contribute a huge part of taxes to our economy. They might be a slight fiscal drain, like immigrants themselves might be a slight fiscal drain, but overall to our economy, they're a huge boon. I don't know where you got that from, but that's a complete lie.
I work with someone, and her son actually got killed by an illegal immigrant.
That's really sad, but like that's not like that shouldn't paint the whole brush for like illegals. Like
it's just an anecdote, but yeah, I'd really like to see this data that says illegal immigrants kill less than legal immigrants, or what?
Yeah, that's just a fact. I'll give you I could just put it in the Google Doc that I'm gonna send you anyways. But I would like to really quickly address this thing. It's not like a crime, like it's not like a criminal case to be an illegal immigrant. It's a civil it's a civil like crime. Like you get put to civil court when you're an illegal immigrant. But moving on. What was it that I wanted to? Oh yeah, the drug war. So what do you think about the drug war?
Nothing really. I mean, a lot of people say it's totally pointless. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really affect me because I don't do drugs, so it's all good.
Do you know how it started?
I've heard about it. I don't know exactly how it started.
So the way it started was black people had just gained their civil rights, okay? They were moving up in the economy. They were getting better jobs. You know, their communities were getting slowly fixed over time. And Nixon decided to target the anti-war left and blacks because he knew that no longer could you just discriminate against these people based on race. So he decided to flood their communities with drugs. This is noted, by the way, by one of his top aides, John L. Richmond. And it's kind of like widely known. Like if you look at laws, for example, like cocaine versus crack, like you have a harsher sentence for cocaine versus crack, even though really there's no like evidence that cocaine is better than crack, like as far as like chemicals go. But back to my other point, really, apparently like these laws, like the drug war itself was literally just created to stop black people's like progression into like a better situation for themselves. You know, it led to more crime, it led to more incarceration, it led to a whole entire generation, like several generations of blacks not being able to take care of their kids properly. It led to crack and just terrible situations. Not to mention the distrust of the police that was already instilled worsened. There's actually something called the Ferguson effect, which shows that like when you have police killings, like it actually increases black people's distrust in the police.
Okay, real quick, I feel like we've been going a while. Can we wrap this up within like 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah, for sure. It's no problem. This was a good conversation, I guess.
Yeah, it was. Again, I'd have to look at the data, but I don't know, if you're doing crack or cocaine, if you really care about your kids, you probably shouldn't be doing those things in the first place.
Well, so like if you like care about your kids and you can't get a good job and someone comes up to you one day and is like, hey man, you sell this crack for me today and you get 1,000 of it, and you can do that every day, and like at the end of the month you come away with like almost like $50,000, like hell yeah, I'm selling crack. Like what you mean? Like, well, I'm gonna work some stupid job where I have to flip burgers versus me going out on the street and taking that relatively like small risk compared to making that amount of money like every month, like 50 grand a month. Like, are you serious? Like, of course I'm gonna take that risk to feed my kids. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's still illegal, and even if you're selling crack, you don't have to smoke it yourself. So again,
well, sure, yeah, but that's the problem, is that even if you're just selling crack, like just having the crack is worse than the cocaine, because whites were more likely to have cocaine. I'm guessing here, but this is probably true because the crack was pushed into the black community, not cocaine. And the different laws for you having crack versus cocaine, if you had crack, you would get a longer, harsher sentence. Like, that's just a fact.
no offense, but that just sounds really stupid to me in general. So you said whites are more likely to do cocaine, blacks are more likely to do crack, and they made a law to where you get in more trouble for crack.
Yes, literally, and they're almost virtually identical in terms of chemical structure. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know how to put it besides that just sounds really, really stupid. Like, I can't understand this because I don't see why you would just not do drugs in the first place. Because, I don't know, I just kind of go by the idea of, take responsibility, just don't do drugs in the first place.
Well, it's not even about, like, not doing drugs. It's like, if you live in a fucked up area, a poor, shitty area with, like, no job prospects, and one day some guy comes up to you, it's like, hey, sell these drugs for me, and you get a lot of money for it. You feed your kids, you'll pay your bills on time, you'll be able to live, maybe you even get out of the hood, and we can make this an international thing. Like, if you actually, let me rephrase this. Let's say that one day you're about to get kicked out of your house, you're about to get evicted, you got a 30 days notice. Let's say that one of your friends comes up to you one day with a mask and a gun, he says, all you gotta do is wait outside in the car, we'll rob the bank, you get a 25% cut, $25,000, and all you have to do is sit out in the car and just drive them away from the crime scene. And you're about to get evicted, your wife is about to leave you, the kids are about to be gone because you can't support them anymore, and this money could literally be life or death. It can save you. Would you take that risk?
I mean, maybe one time, but again, this is hypothetical. And it's better just not to get wrapped up with that in the first place. But if you need that money right then, right there, okay, maybe do it once and then say, I'm done with this. But I can't relate to this at all, and I don't really see how anyone can when you can just choose not to get involved with.
Well, that's what I said. It's not at that point, like, okay, let me make one more analogy and then we'll wrap this up. Let's say that you really like diamonds. Let's say that one day you get shipwrecked and you have a briefcase full of diamonds. Let's say that in a normal situation, you would never trade these diamonds for everything. You want them in your personal collection. Let's say that Jeff Bezos comes up on his personal helicopter and he's like, hey, I'll give you some food, some supplies, and I'll get you a helicopter ride out of here if you give me that briefcase of diamonds. In a normal everyday situation, you wouldn't trade those diamonds for anything. But this is your life. You're depending on it. Like, if you don't trade these diamonds, you're gonna die, so you trade the diamonds. Would you say at this point that this person makes the choice to trade the diamonds when in any other scenario they wouldn't, or that maybe there's a little bit more factors that are pushing them to make this choice than normal?
It's still ultimately someone's choice.
Okay.
I mean, that's just kind of the way I look at things and how I was kind of taught to, and it makes sense to me. I mean, even if... Yeah, okay, so another example is if, okay, you want to succeed really bad, sell drugs, that's like equivalent to, I really want to win at this sport, I could just do steroids, but, you still shouldn't do that because it's a bad way to get ahead. You should just work really, really hard.
Well, so, like, some people just can't work really, really hard. Like, there are exceptional cases, sure, but, like, maybe you're the kid who doesn't get picked for, like, going to college and basketball to get into college, and so maybe you just decide, hey, I can't get into college, and there's no future for me. Like, I'm stupid, I don't get good grades in school, college is the only option. Maybe I just, I rob a couple of houses for that 25 grand so I can pay for the tuition. Like, maybe you make that, when we're saying this in the compatible sense here, as in, you make choices, but ultimately your environment, makes you make these choices. You make the choice to do these crimes so you can get into college and have a possibly better life.
Affirmative action.
Affirmative action usually only benefits white women.
I'm pretty sure that's not how it works at all.
No, it is. And even if that were, even with affirmative action, one, it has severely positive effects. For example, diversity in schools have shown that it increased social cohesiveness and other things like that. But more importantly, affirmative action doesn't really like even if affirmative action was like this serious, like, oh my god, all the minorities are getting into school and they can't really do it, like, even if it was that serious, like, whites don't get into school. Like, I forgot what study this was, I'll find it, but apparently whites don't even get into school for like like academic scholarships. Usually it's like either mommy daddy welfare, or they got into it for sports, or they got into it because their dad or mom made a donation, or someone was like a friend or a relative at the college and got them in. So it's not necessarily that all these blacks are just waltzing into college because affirmative action, I get to go to med school with a 1.3 GPA. It's like, usually it's like, okay, we know that you're most likely to be disadvantaged, here's a scholarship that you can use, hopefully you do well at these schools, and usually that's what happens.
Okay, but if you have a sports scholarship, that's still something you did.
I mean, sure, yeah. Like, if you have a sports scholarship, it's something you did, but you're taking the spot of someone who can actually go to the school and do something good with their life and not just go on to play in the NFL. Like, yeah, sure, playing in the NFL is cool and all, but, like, you're taking the spot of someone who could go to medical school and, like, cure cancer or something, right? Like, that would be the same argument you would make for the affirmative action people.
No, I was just saying affirmative action, that kind of goes against the idea of white privilege in the first place.
But it mostly benefits white women.
No, it doesn't. It benefits...
No, it does. I know it's shocking, because what you've most likely heard is that all these black people are just waltzing into college, doing backflips and shit, playing high school basketball and dunking hoops into college, but that's just not the case. Like, most of the affirmative action that we hear about isn't going to, like, the poor, like, innocent black people who maybe have, like, a 3.8 GPA in the poor ghettos. Like, most of this is going towards like richer, like, middle class people who just, maybe kind of just want to get into college with these scholarships. This is usually where it's going.
What does that have to do with a white woman?
Because the white women are the majority of people who get these affirmative action stuff. Scholarships, not stuff.
White women, it's for minorities.
Yeah, and women are considered minorities. In the broad sense of being marginalized, not being a literal minority.
There's more women than men, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but women are more likely to be marginalized than men.
What do you mean by marginalized?
So, marginalized is in... Wait. Let's say, for example, if you're a woman, and this is true, if you are a woman, you are less likely to get the promotion than a white man. That's just, like, a fact.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, they're outgoing, they're usually weaker in general. I mean, it kind of makes sense. It just has to do with the way you think, all kinds of stuff like that, but yeah. Women usually aren't leaders, is all.
Sure. I mean, we could have like a whole discussion about like feminism and something another day, but you wanted to wrap it up, so I'll let you give closing statements, and then we could, be done.
Okay, sure. I would say my closing statements would be, this was good, because usually when I argue with people about this supposed privilege, they just say, like, oh, I think the police or white people just naturally hate black people. Even if some of the data you have isn't, like, super recent or addresses it perfectly, no one has given me any data before to back up their statements, so I'm definitely willing to look into your data more. Also, I still stand by what I said. A lot of what you consider privilege, I do not consider privilege, and I do not think if I were black or Latino, it would affect me at all, simply because I don't do any crime, and I don't do anything outside of the ordinary. I simply work out, I go to work, and I go home. I don't get into trouble. The worst I could get in trouble for is speeding. So I disagree with your definitions of privilege there. However, I would like to look into a lot of the things you mentioned, and ultimately, to a slight extent, maybe my views might change if I look at the data, but as a whole, no, nothing political changed was huge, or my ultimate views on racial or white privilege, and how I look at it as a whole didn't really change, but it could change a little bit, or I might believe in it to some extent if I look at the data. But yep, as a whole, I meant what I said. I just need to post the data to back up what I'm saying. But yeah, I guess that's my closing statement.
Sure. Two questions. One, be honest here. Are you like a alt-right, like leading like neo-Nazi, save the whites, like white genocide is happening, race war now type, or no?
What do you mean exactly?
I mean like are you like into that, like whites are better than everyone else because we've worked hard for it, whites are superior, you know, Asians less creative, blacks dumb and unintelligent, that sort of thing?
Well, everything we've said we're just looking at the data. I base everyone as an individual. I don't look at them and assume something. But I'm never gonna back down and say, oh, white people are bad or anything like that. As a whole, it is a fact that white people have created most things. Like, if you look at all of our technology, and again, I'm not trying to sound offensive, that's just the truth. Like, most of our technology, whites created. Even Asians, which, yeah, are very smart, they haven't created nearly of what the white man does. I mean, if you consider that alt-right, sure, you could call me that, but I don't.
I don't think you're. Let me rephrase the question and let me say something real quick. Do you watch Nick Fuentes?
I've heard a lot about him. I don't watch him that much. I've watched clips of him. No, I don't really watch him consistently, but yeah, I know who that is.
Okay, good. Okay. And do you know what the fire lance is?
No, I do not know what the fire lance
So
is.
it's common. I mean, it's common knowledge, but I could give you like a Wikipedia article on this. That gunpowder was discovered by the Asians, and what Asians had done with this is they created these devices called fire lances. It's basically like fireworks, except you point it at people and shoot them. And that's pretty much the precursor to what we would consider like the flintlock pistol. The idea that you would take gunpowder and you would use it to fire projectiles at people. That's the precursor to the modern day firearm that we think of today. Just wanted to sneak that in. Okay, so is there any channels that you wanted to like maybe shout out? Maybe yours? I don't know. I only have 56 subscribers, but I'm trying to get it out there. Oh no, don't.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. Honestly, okay, I will give a channel. I will say it has nothing to do with anything we've talked about. You could maybe say it has a little bit to do with somewhat conservative values, but I would like to shout out Gabe Dog. At least I think that's his channel name right now. I really like Gabe Dog. You can check him out. Has nothing to do with what we've talked about. Maybe there's another one. Yeah, he's one of the only ones I'm subbed to right now. If I make a YouTube channel, maybe, but I can't shout myself out now because I don't have a channel. But yeah, I recommend looking at him. But yeah, that's all I got. I guess that's my closing statements.
Sure, no problem. You could stay in the Discord as long as you like. If you want to leave, if you want to stay, I don't really care. You could tell anyone to join if they want to have a discussion. This was more productive than I thought it was going to be, honestly, based on your comments.
Oh, well, glad to hear. Oh, do you have any closing statements? Like, I disagree with you on this, but I still think that, or no?
No, pretty much this went like your positions were pretty much what I thought they were gonna be. This, not to be rude, but like this typical not to be rude here, like arrogant, like white middle class.
I don't care. That's
This
cool.
typical arrogant white middle class kid who really didn't get in trouble in school, didn't do that much in life yet, who has this very simplistic view of the world. If blacks just don't commit crimes, it's gonna be chill, like that sort of thing, like that sort of view. I was pretty much like hit the nail on the coffin in what I thought. But you're much more reasonable than most when it comes to the white privilege discussion. At least you're willing to listen instead of calling me some lefty liberal cuck and then just blocking me on Twitter.
Well, okay, I appreciate it. Like I said, you don't have to say I'm sorry before anything. Like, if you still consider me privileged, or you don't have to say sorry for any of that, because I have views that some might find offensive too, and But yeah, it was definitely fun to exchange, and and again, I'll come back later and link anything I can find on your channel. It might take a day or so, but I'll look for all the claims I made, and I'll try and link them in another comment on your latest video. But yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Trust me, it's gonna take more than a day to edit the video that I'm gonna have to make out of this. So, thank you for the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. This kind of flew by. How long has this been?
It's been more. It's slightly under 2 hours.
Jeez. Yeah, I'm surprised it went that long. It kind of flew by. Yeah. Anyways, I guess that's about it. It was fun, man. I'm gonna go see. Yeah, I'll probably go do something else, or maybe head to bed soon. But I'll look forward to watching your videos later. I wish you the best of luck for your channel, and thanks for the conversation.
Thanks, man. I wish you best in your endeavors.
Appreciate it, man. See you next time. Maybe in the future we could have conversation. I mean, this was really more of a conversation than a debate, and some of this I should have been more prepared for, which is my fault because I had many days to research, so no excuses. But yeah, I'd like to have conversations on other things sometime if you're willing to. But I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I'm always willing to talk. Maybe you should have made better choices. I'm sorry, I just wanted to say that. Alright, but no, this was a good conversation.
Oh, you mean choices as in beforehand for research? Yeah. That's what you meant, yeah.
Alright, see you later.